Hey, beautiful people, it's Miss Marisha, and yes, it's a little bit of a different scene, but this is episode 3 of Refined Gardens. I am excited and a little nervous. Maybe a couple of other emotions are at play right now, but I thought that switching up the scene was important because the conversation I think that's important to have today is also going to be a little different than usual. As you may know, if you've been watching and tuning in lately, then you have seen that the first few episodes and some of my other complimentary content and resources is all kind of in the garden, related to the garden, but also me just really sharing words of wisdom, lessons learned, but more in a context for you, the viewer, without having had or provided so much context or information about who I am. So I thought today's episode could take a little bit of a different turn where I share more about who I am. And as you can see, my overalls, the sun's been out. That not the topic of today's conversation, but so I'm really actually just kind of recognizing it for real, because it's been really hot the last couple of days. And if you haven't already, you can check out episode 2. And actually, it's not the last episode. It was probably my latest video, where I was rototilling that thing out in the garden, like trying to tame a wild horse or something out there. But anyway, we are in a little bit of a bubble bath situation, because your girl is sore. Okay, let's start there. The work of a garden, especially like for real, like this is me getting in the weeds, getting in the dirt, tilling the land. All of that. It's real. It's real out here. Shout out to our farmers. Shout out to anyone in the ag field. Yes, hats off. Much respect, because yes, your girl is feeling it. So Sundays I like to kind of chill and just reset for the week. So I thought that my setup was going to be here in my bubble bath. But also, like I said, I really wanted this time together to be an opportunity for me to share a little bit more about who I am. How did I get here to this garden series? Why am I doing it? What led to this? So let's rewind a little bit. My name is Marisha, and I'm originally from Fresno, California, so the Central Valley, about a couple of hours north of Los Angeles, the entertainment hub. You've got about an hour or so away from Yosemite. Of course, being immersed in nature is something that I obviously love. But then you've also got the hustle and bustle of the creative, innovative space of San Francisco, a couple of hours north of where I grew up in the Central Valley. So this is a little bit of a different vibe here. We call it Ag Town, Cow Town. This is really kind of the breadbasket of the United States. A lot of our produce and everything is kind of grown here and shipped off to feed the rest of you beautiful people. So that's where I grew up. I grew up, really kind of the get your schoolwork done, find a good job, work that job 20, 30, 40 years, then you can retire and have a peaceful, calm, fun life, right? So essentially the whole 3/4 of your life is really dedicated to the grind culture, the grind mentality. And I subscribed to that mindset. I, tried to go to the good schools and get the good grades, and everything about my identity was really wrapped up in performance, being polished, being perfect, getting straight A's, right? Like getting the jobs and, you know, the titles that were meaningful, that were big, organizations that were, you know, resume glitter, if you will. And so, yeah, I was also a student athlete. So I was doing things to diversify my portfolio, if you will. So playing sports, being in the band. I was the clarinet player. I loved the clarinet. It was actually really fun. I also really loved theater, which I only did my senior year in high school and my senior year in college. We'll get back to that, I'm sure, at some point. But long story short, you know, I did all the things. I was checking off all the check boxes and really trying to, again, create a life that was following the script, the expectations of other people's standards and what other people considered to be valuable. And essentially, I learned quite early on to silence my own desires, to suppress my identity, right? In exchange for my representative, who was a people pleaser, who was, again, a grinder, right? Somebody who was all about, look at me, I'm accomplishing this and that and that and this. So all of that. Now let's fast forward to the 2008-2009 economic crisis. I had just graduated college. I was living in Atlanta, bought a condo, started my master's program, and boom, budget cuts come down. I'm an elementary school teacher, and let's just say I was one of the teachers that actually cared about my students, and I made sure that we were doing things in my school, in my community, that really championed the total well-being, not just the academic or intellectual capacities of my students, but holistic development was really important to me really early on. But by being a true champion of my students, and which ultimately meant making people do their jobs. When budget cuts came in, I was the youngest and newest teacher, kid on the block, so to speak, and was let go. So now I am left with financial devastation, which turned into not talking about my challenges and what I'm dealing with, whether it's with friends, family, whomever. I tried therapy for a little bit, but back then, you know, this mental health conversation was still very taboo. So I did not feel comfortable being open about what I was dealing with. And quite frankly, I didn't actually have the language and the knowledge to even describe what I was experiencing. I guess if they say hindsight is 20/20. So if I'm looking back, you can say I was dealing with depression, anxiety, stress, all the things, literally early career, you know, my mid-20s or, you know, mid-century life crisis, if you will. But that is where my journey to healing and wellness, total wellness, began. You know, I'm going to the Georgia Center for Meditation, you know, every Wednesday. And it kind of reminded me of, you know how people get really excited about 5 o'clock on a Friday because they get to spend the weekend, the next 2 days, doing whatever it is that they want. 1 second, I think I got some bubble bath stuff in my eye. Ooh, Lord. It's popping. Spicy. Woo! And I'm gonna take a sip. Shout out to Hydro Flask. Y'all want to sponsor? Because JT said keep your hand out. So, you know, I'm just putting it out in the universe. Hydro Flask, what it do? Woo! Okay. Again, shout out to the farmers for the lemon and cucumber, which will be some items in the garden, but for now, we're supporting California grown. Anywho, so yes, back to the story. 5 o'clock Friday, people, that's like their favorite day because of course you're off work at that time and you get to spend the next 48 plus hours doing whatever it is that you want / need to do, feel like doing. And that's how Wednesdays were for me. It was the day of, you know, I've got this 1 hour experience that I'm going to be immersed in. And even though I didn't really understand meditation when I first started, the practice of just sitting in silence, and we were being guided to obviously close our eyes and, you know, kind of tune into the sonic experience. You're trying to mostly focus on one thing, which is the sounds of, you know, the song bowls, what have you. So in a sense, it was like a solo or solitary experience, even though you're in community. And so I really appreciated that. I never really got to know the people around me other than their faces that were familiar from showing up every Wednesday, but we didn't get into lots of conversation. And I think, again, just the circumstances of the time, right? Like everyone is dealing with something. And this was a space of escape almost. At least that's kind of how I described it at the time. I was getting away from the chaos of my life, but I was doing it in a way that was teaching me a new skill set, right? And so eventually I began to understand meditation and what we were doing with that practice. And again, this is well before the buzz of what we know meditation and all of that stuff to be today. This was not a popular, trendy concept back then. Quite frankly, I was the weirdo in my friend group family, which I didn't really even talk about in my family because we grew up in the Baptist church, which I felt some sort of, we getting a little sidetracked, but yeah, it just felt like, ooh, church, meditation, it just seems to be somewhat in conflict. But that was because I was still in a space of, again, subscribing to other people's ideologies and standards for my life. Even though I felt better, even though I was calming down, even though I was practicing something that was putting my nervous system at, you know, peace and restoring my clarity, just despite all of that, I was still conflicted with the practice. But over time, as I continued to go, again, with no real major change external, you know, in my life, right? I still was in the process of losing my home because I had lost my job. I'm still in my master's program, but slightly struggling because my livelihood is gone. My identity has been stolen because who I was, again, at that time was very much so tied to what I did, what I accomplished, how well I performed. And so, you know, being trapped in that sort of existence, way of existing, grinding, right? Which makes zero sense because, come on, people, grind means to break something down into the smallest possible particles of that said thing, object, whatever. I don't want to live like that. I felt that I had literally been ground down to like pretty much dust. I was just there. But I always knew that there was something else. There was something more. This is not life. This cannot be my life. If it is for other people, cool, but not for me. And so, yeah, meditation was that practice that was helping me to really allow the thoughts to surface, to allow the different emotions that I had been feeling about not only my financial and job and school and house situation, but who I was and how I got to that point in my life, right? Like, it was allowing me to really surface all of these things and confront them. I was being exposed to myself, right? And it was uncomfortable. Let's just keep it all the way real. This work, the inner work, tending to our inner gardens is no joke. And a lot of people do not want to do it because it is that extremely uncomfortable. So, so much so I call it my dark night of the soul. Like, it was really, which is not coined by me. I think it was Joseph Campbell in The Hero's Journey. Check that out if you have not, but it is definitely worth a read and or listen if you haven't tapped in. But essentially, yes, I call it the dark night of the soul because everything about my life, my existence at that time, my early 20s, mid 20s, was beginning to surface for the first time because I don't have a job. I don't have this identity that I was able to hide behind anymore. All of this stuff was going on. But meditation, the Georgia Center for Meditation, what I eventually learned from practicing within this community, shout out to my dad. I grew up a basketball player. He was a Lakers fan. I like the Lakers, but I can genuinely say I didn't always have a team as much as I enjoyed specific players. Allen Iverson, Vince Carter, Muggsy Bogues, right? Like I liked the small players. Who else? I can see his face. Not Rick Fox. Derek. Lakers. Ooh. Can't think of his name, but I can see his face. I can see his game. Either way, that's not the point. So, meditation, basketball. Shout out to my dad. Basketball became the analogy metaphor that surfaced for me during my time engaging in the Georgia Center for Meditation community. And it made the practice of what I was doing in meditation so much more real and clear and useful ultimately. And so here's how it happened. When you're learning basketball, you don't start with 3-pointers. You're not doing all the crossovers and, shaking people up and all the saucy stuff, right? Fancy. You're just starting with the fundamentals, the basics. And some of the drills that you engage in are designed to teach you those basics. And so one of the drills that we would always do is this sort of, pass. So the coach would split up the team, half on one side, half on the other side of the half court line. And we'd go through bounce pass, chest pass, right? And when you are in the offensive side of that drill, we learn to catch the ball and drop down into our triple threat position. Ooh, I'm going somewhere. Remember, we're still talking about meditation and this journey that I've been on, but it was basketball that kind of helped to illuminate what I needed to know to move to the next phase of my journey. So, fundamentals, the drills, the basics. We are in the beginning of basketball. You're learning the fundamentals. And so from these bounce passes or any kind of passing drill, you are in the beginning taught to drop down into your triple threat position, which is a position, triple threat. See how my arms are extended now? I can create some space between my valuable, which is the basketball, and the opposition to my valuable, right? The other team. And so when you drop down, you're given a couple of seconds to think about what's my next best decision. I'm not trying to win the game from this vantage point, from this position. I'm trying to think of what's the next best move. So kind of like chess, right? There's a process of thinking it out. You've got the little timer. I don't know anything about chess, but I see the timer is kind of like you've got so much time to think about what your next move is. Same with basketball. You've got your triple threat position. You can hold it for a couple of seconds. It's called triple threat because there's ideally 3 options that you have available to you to navigate around the opposition that's in front of you. So you've got, and I'm not even using my mic right now, obviously, because I'm in the bathtub and I just thought of this impromptu kind of. So whatever the audio is going to sound like today, I must just say you don't have to bear with me on that. But anyway, so you have 3 options. You can pass it to a teammate who's a little bit more open than you. You can dribble to get closer to the basket or another teammate who has more opening available than you. Or maybe you are in a position where you got to pull up and shoot, right? And those are your options, but you've given yourself some time to slow down, to calm down, to think about your next best move from here, right? The triple threat position. And so one day, after a couple of months of going to the Georgia Center for Meditation, getting my meditation on while I'm dealing with foreclosure at that time, while I'm dealing with looking for, consistent work and not the contract gig here and there. I am in my master's program. I had just bought my, all of these things, right, that I'm dealing with on top of, again, now I'm in a space where I'm open. Like my head's open, my heart's open. And so life and all of it that I have experienced to date, it just seems like it's just coming to the surface. So I'm now navigating childhood things and things that I dealt with in college, and again, trying to understand who am I and what do I really want to do in this life of mine? Like all of this stuff on top of the day-to-day kind of immediate things that I'm confronted with. This analogy of basketball just somehow pops into my head, and it made me think. That is what this 1 hour a day, 1 day a week at the Georgia Center for Meditation is teaching me to do with my life. So no longer am I playing the game of basketball, but I still got opposition out there. I've still got things to navigate out there that if I don't have the mindset of what can I do, right? What do I have control over? Which the only thing we ever have control over is our thoughts and our emotions and how we choose to navigate not only those, but the external things going on in our lives around us. Those are the only things that I can change and choose and control. Everything else, well, it's out of your hands. And so meditation was bringing me this wisdom, this understanding, that from where I am, who I am right now, what I have right now, what I'm experiencing right now, I have a choice. I have choices that I can decipher which one is the next best move to navigate my current circumstances. No job or stable job, health issues, financial challenges, home being, all of these things, right, that I'm being confronted with. That's the opposition. That's the other team. I just listed 5 things. So that's the other team. How do I triple threat position or meditate to slow down, pause, assess the circumstances, and then determine the next best steps available to me? That is the blessing, the lesson, the wisdom that I was beginning to understand about this practice that changed the trajectory of my life. So let's just fast forward. Life was life-in. We found some other great opportunities. Life was kind of like this. And I moved back home eventually in my late 20s. And for me, full transparency, moving back home was a sign of failure. Not only because I did not really enjoy the city that I grew up in. It just, I'm a big dreamer, big thinker, and places like San Francisco, New York, like things are happening, things are moving in places like that. I liked that energy at that time. I was creative and I had ideas and I wanted to see things change in the world. And my little cow town was very much not. I mean, for those of you who do follow me, who subscribe to the channel, go ahead and click that bell if you haven't already. But for those of you who do and are familiar with Girlfriends, shout out to Mara, the creator of that and other amazing cultural phenomenon. Girlfriends, one of the characters, Tony Childs, if you recall, she was also from Fresno, California, which was insane to me. I was like, oh my God, yes, I get it, Tony, get the fuck out of there. Like, that her character was, she just did not, she wasn't feeling Fresno. But it was more because, again, she was a big thinker, dreamer, visionary. She wanted things. She wanted to go and do and be. And this just is not really the environment that nurtures that kind of energy. Or at least not when I was growing up and when I moved back in my late 20s. And so I saw it as a sign of, again, failure. And I felt as though, again, like, who am I? And what does this mean now that I've come back? And what are people gonna think? Again, my thoughts were always about performance and being polished and perfection. And this was yet another blemish to not only my circumstances, but the way that I was processing things at that time. This was a blemish, a mark, right? A failure, an indicator that me, the person, the individual, is a failure, and not just the times that we're in. Well, I wasn't prepared to navigate those things, whether financially, emotionally, mentally, etc. And so instead of seeing this as a blessing, as an opportunity to start again, I spent about 2 more years in a woe is me mentality. Very bitter victim mindset. Moving forward, though, I, began reading different books and, listening to podcasts, and I'm going to these different workshops that, from different life coaches and the other gurus that tell you how to pivot, essentially. So this was, again, back in the, mid 2000s, and so it was just a different world. But what I noticed I was doing, I was just consuming. And it felt great to expand and have language that helped me to articulate what my experiences were. I didn't feel isolated as much, even though I was around people and I lived with my family. Just the understanding that the authors of these books and the, facilitators of these conferences and speakers on these different podcasts and they understood. And the people who were tuning in, the people who were commenting on the blogs and on the post, they understood the e-courses, all of this stuff that I was just consuming and taking in, but was not always implementing because I was just on to the next, taking it in. But eventually things turned around. I move out, life unfolds beautifully. I end up in Phoenix after living in the Bay Area for a little bit and, working back in education. And now I'm in Phoenix, and it just felt like home. And I had never really said that before. And I didn't buy a property in Phoenix at this point, and I wasn't in a financial position at that point to buy a property, but it just felt like home for the first time. It was quiet, it was slow. Even though it was the fastest growing city, probably the first 3 or 4 years of the 7 that I was there, it just felt like I made a deliberate choice, and this deliberate choice felt right. And so not only am I working for the university, I'm doing corporate wellness, So I'm teaching people these different stress management tools and, really kind of being the person that I wish that I had access to prior to my mid-20s life crisis. The things that I wish that I knew, that I learned in my home, in my school, right? Like those were the things that I was finally able to put into the world. And I loved what I did. I loved engaging with the people that I had an opportunity to engage with, whether it was my students, whether it was employees at different companies. Just learning their stories was such, and also the the expansion that was happening for them because of the conversations that I was curating, because of the experiences that I was designing for them. It just felt like every aspect of my life was turning around and I was blooming, not only professionally, but personally. I was seeing the fruits of my labor, right? The years that I had spent in my dark night of the soul, I was starting to finally see some light at the end of the tunnel. But what I didn't really recognize then, that I do now, was that it was still because it was tied to how I was doing professionally, right? And the fact that I was able to be self-sufficient again. And so it was just this return to performance, to my representative. So there wasn't this unconditional love for life yet, right? So despite the conditions, I couldn't say at that time, if I go back and share truthfully, I couldn't say that despite the conditions of my life, at that point in time, what I found that I had a genuine love for my life. I think the zest for life and my love for life at that point in time was really because of the transformation that I was making in my professional area of life. And that, again, was something that I didn't know then. But once it got to that point, once it started to really surface that I haven't dug deep enough yet, it was probably during the pandemic. So fast forward 2017 to 2020, I, again, am in Phoenix. I'm, teaching and coaching and consulting and living on my own downtown. I've got a car now, the car, might I add, that I wanted, and I named her Phoenix. And it was just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. But then the pandemic hit, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be very transparent here, people. I know that there was a lot of tragedy and death and chaos happening at that time, but it was, for me, a very different experience. And while I could sympathize, empathize with other people, I was in a bubble, in a space where I was finally at peace. And I did not want to take on the chaos and the noise and being bombarded by the stories of disaster and violence and all. I just said, no, I'm gonna tune out. I've tuned in to everyone else's experiences. I've taken care of other people's kids. This is okay for me. I felt finally for the first time a sense of peace where I could think again. I was still getting paid, so there was that sense of stability, right? But now I don't have to perform in the way that I've been performing. Things are a little bit more slow, and I'm okay with that. And so I was learning to fall in love with this pace and this unfolding of who I was and what life was. And I could acknowledge and send prayers and good vibes to the world around me, my loved ones, all of that. But I also felt like I was in a space for the first time where I needed to nurture me my mind, my body, my spirit. And that's kind of what I was prioritizing. That's what I was doing. And spending more time in nature. Arizona was different than maybe many other states or the rest of the world when it came to lockdown and all of that stuff. I'm not sure if that's the correct terminology you guys used, but yes, we were not. And so life was kind of normal, other than in-person instruction, right? So I wasn't going into the classroom. I wasn't facilitating experiences, corporate wellness experiences in person. Everything was still virtual. But outside of that, once I was done with that, I was literally living my life exactly the same. And I needed that. I could wake up when I wanted. I could go where I wanted, what I want. I didn't have the same, I have to be here, I have to do this. And it was quenching a thirst that I didn't really know that I had or needed, but I did. And I wanted more of that. And so when we came back from the pandemic, I'm gonna speed up a little bit here, but coming back from the pandemic, so back into in-person instruction and events and all that stuff. Whoa, that was really hard to witness and experience. Students were physically present, but you could tell they were just checked out. And that was hard for me because, again, top down, admin to teacher, right? Like, you're still expected to do everything like you were as if there was no pandemic that just happened, as if COVID wasn't still killing people, as if people weren't still being laid off from their jobs and, ultimately losing their homes. And the thing was, like I said, in my early 20s, I had experienced all of that. I had seen and felt personally the effects of economy shifts and being laid off and identities being destroyed, like all of that, and the emotional, mental, physical, financial, like I understood the toll that took. And so to be in an environment and also see the rest of the world, different industries also trying to just get back to normal, oh my God, I did not want to condone that. Because I knew what implications that was going to have for the people who they weren't being forced. Let's make that very clear. They weren't being forced to adhere. But we'll just say there was a heavy coercion that, hey, life is going back to normal. You're still in a top university. Your grades still matter. Right? Like, it was almost as if we were forgetting about the human behind the grade, right? We were forgetting about the human in the seat at the university that made the university what the university, like it just, and not just the students, but the people who worked there, who were supporting the students, the faculty, the staff, the people behind the brands, the companies, the organizations, the educational institute, like we were forgetting about the human as far as I was concerned. There was growing apathy. It just felt like zombies everywhere that I turned. And I did not, but I knew why. Because people hadn't fully processed what was happening. Many people didn't have access to language, the support resources to navigate all of that. And it was just like, here's the experience, boom, we're all living it, and now we're going back into normal life with no interventions. And I just felt like, I don't really know if I can be a part of this. And on top of that, I was facilitating, again, these company wellness experiences. And I'm hearing the stories of the team members and what they're dealing with, from the normalized, kind of common burnout experience all the way to suicidal ideation. Like, seriously, people were talking about unaliving themselves in some of these conversations. And I did not feel equipped to hold space for that in every environment that I worked, everywhere that I turned, now I'm the container for other people again. And when I'm present, when I'm in these spaces, I give a damn. I care, and I want to like do what I can to support and make a change, make a difference. And I felt myself taking on, and not only the spaces that I was holding, but I'm a solopreneur at this point. I'm also a faculty associate. So I'm grading papers and creating assignments. I'm also making the calls to get the business, for my corporate contracts, and marketing myself, and drafting the scope of work, and taking the meetings to have a conversation about the scope of work. And if I do get that contract, negotiating the budget, and then going in, like, it was just so much before I even got to the part of dealing with the people directly. And now dealing with the people, it's kind of like, this is the icing on the cake. I don't have any, I'm tapped out. I am tapped out. By the time I'm done facilitating a 60, 90-minute session, I'm laying on the bed. I'm laying on the floor when I get home, staring at the ceiling. A good 30, 45, 75 minutes. Taking hot baths, another 30, 45 minutes, just sitting. No talking, no noise, nothing is on. Not even music. And y'all know I love me some music. It doesn't even matter the genre, but that's another story. Anyway. So there was all of this happening. And I just got to a point where it was like, nah, I can't do it. Because I'm starting to feel how I felt when I was in my mid-20s. But this time I'm aware. This time I do have tools. And so I used my tools. I had the language, I had the concept, the understanding, the awareness, the access to get the supports. And I navigated through, right? Chose the next best steps. But once I saw, I'm just going to keep hitting a wall. We got to change the environment. We've got to uproot the plant. You are the garden and the gardener, right? That's how we close every episode of this show. You are the garden and the gardener. Trust what wants to bloom. And if the environment in which you are planted ain't fertile ground, you got to figure it out. Tend to the soil. Get her done. Or what's going to happen to the plant? What's going to happen to the seed that's been planted? So that was essentially the mindset that I began to have about my circumstances. And I said, okay, well, I guess it is time. I think I did a year and a half, so 3 semesters after returning to in-person instruction after the pandemic. I closed out all my contracts for my corporate wellness clients. And then I still had one gig. I was doing some marketing and recruiting to open a vocational school in Phoenix. And so I still had that, decided I was going to take a sabbatical, and then I was going to finish up my corporate contracts, and I would just have this, marketing and admissions thing going on. And eventually, a couple months after deciding all of that and having now just one source of income, I wake up to an email where I'm no longer, able to work there. And it's like, oh, okay. And while it was abrupt and unexpected, I was like, this might be the very thing that I need. I wasn't quite sure where I was going to go, what I was going to do, but I had lived my life in that grind and scramble and accomplish and the next and the next. all my life, and I was tired. I was absolutely tired. I was physically exhausted. I was mentally and emotionally drained because I was seeing the world forget about humanity in a way that was just like, oh, they really don't care. Like, I think I saw it to a certain extent. I mean, I'm in education and I've been in education. A lot of the environments were in underestimated communities, let's just say. And so, yeah, I have seen people not care about people, let's just say. But this took it to a whole nother level. I was like, no, this can't. But I'm also not interested in trying to solve the problem right now. I gotta focus on your girl. I gotta get it together. Because if you remember from a couple of moments ago, when I said I moved to Phoenix, it felt like home. I found joy. I found peace again. A lot of that was because, as I mentioned, it was based on performance. It was based on productivity. It was based on my profession and how things were going with that. And it wasn't all gravy. There was some struggle bus moments, but overall, things were pretty good and things were, cool. I was making moves, so to speak. But pandemic, take a sabbatical, end my contracts, eventually got let go from my third gig. And I'm kind of okay with it at first because I just felt, like I said, I need a break, and I need to be able to think and breathe and create and just sit and hear. Like, I need to be able to download, and I knew that was missing. And so things kind of falling by the wayside was like, it felt like this is my opportunity to receive now. What is the guidance for my life? Not me trying to control my life and dictate the next moves and operate from places of fear and frustration and force, right? But like, flow. I need to flow. And I know what I need to do to get into that space of flow. I know what it takes for me. I'm not saying what y'all need to do. I'm simply saying I knew my concoction, right? Sitting alone in solitude, or in nature. I knew that movement of my body, whether that was gym or boxing or dancing for hours in my living room, right? Like, there were certain things that I knew for me allowed me to calm, clear my mind, become more open and receptive to the guidance that is designed for me. And this was prime environment and timing for me to just exercise the practice, engage in the practices, use the tools, right? The techniques that I know work for me. And that's what I did. And I was learning to hear, trust, and follow the wisdom, the guidance for my life. And eventually, very sooner rather than later, let's just say, I was quickly confronted with, but I should be working. I should be accomplishing. I'm just being, and that doesn't feel comfortable. That doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel productive. That doesn't feel normal. Like, I was starting to be confronted with, the way that I'm operating isn't normal. It's not what everybody else is doing. It doesn't feel, again, productive. It doesn't feel comfortable, ultimately. That wasn't how I was raised. I was raised to accomplish and perform and to be on and I was not doing any of those things. I was taking naps when I wanted to. I was going for hikes when I wanted to. I was creating, dancing, just being. And that was uncomfortable. Being was uncomfortable. And I know that there are so many contexts in which people can relate to that. Being a lot, just being, not doing, being was uncomfortable. Just presence, not performance, not polishing up and being perfect, that was uncomfortable. Sorry, not sorry, but I pause because I'm being teleported back to that time period, and I just see myself and I'm feeling literally the visceral experience that I was having at that time. And so it's just, this is a moment of gratitude right here. This is a moment of gratitude. Because what I was growing through, oh, it was so uncomfortable. But it was intentional at that time. I did it intentionally. See, my mid-20s life crisis, that was unexpected, I suppose, right? But this was different. This was intentional disruption. I knew that I had to do it differently this time. I had to listen to internal GPS, internal guidance protection system, that universal intelligence, God was speaking to me, and I had to listen to the wisdom that was being provided, to the direction of my life that was being given for me to follow. And even if it didn't make sense for other people, I couldn't let that, even if it didn't make sense to me, I couldn't let either of those be what stopped me from actually hearing, trusting, and following. And I didn't. And it was very uncomfortable. Eventually, let's fast forward, I have to move home. Round number 2. But this time I don't regret it. This time I don't have any sense of failure, or, like it was not ideal. Well, right. But I was at a point where, okay, I know where I want to go now. I know what I'm here to do. I know I understand my divine assignment. I recognize my path and why it was as chaotic as it was, but as beautifully, perfectly imperfect as it was, right? Even in the moments of contrast, beauty, lessons, expansion, wisdom was all a part of that. And I didn't want to abandon, suppress that anymore. My story, all of it, my experiences, all of them were relevant, important to not only who I was then, as I'm deciding, hey, gotta come back home now, but who I am now, and also who I'm becoming and where I'm going. And so fast forward, here we are in Fresno, California, the same home that I grew up in, which I'm so grateful to my parents who have agreed to let me move back in. They have been super supportive, maybe not sometimes always happy that I've needed the support, but have supported nonetheless. And other loved ones, family, friends, and loved ones who have supported in one way, shape, or form. Super grateful. But we're back. And this time, with a clear understanding of who I am, despite the being a free agent, right? So I had not, prior to a week ago, been employed working for, just kind of freelance things here and there. But outside of that, I also did Uber for a period of time. But even in that, I got so much confirmation that here you go again. You're trying to force your way. You're trying to control all of this stuff that you're doing is taking you away from what I told you to do. Like, what are you supposed to be doing? So choosing to garden was a way for me to slow down and stay connected to my mind, body, spirit, universal intelligence, God, the wisdom that is meant for me. It is a practice in presence over performance, which again is something that I have done as an athlete, as a member of the band, as, again, professionally, in every domain, even romantic relation, you're just performing for the other person instead of being and being comfortable being. It's always about being a container for other people to be comfortable. But this is about reciprocity. When you nurture the land, when you tend to and nurture the seeds that you plant, all of that, so you bear fruit, right? And so as much as this is about tending the soil, this conversation, this moment in my life, this series is also about, again, tending to the soul. And so while there are a number of different things that I shared about my personal story, being back has given me the opportunity, as I mentioned, to one, be around family. I get to see, the environment that has shaped me. And as the garden and the gardener, I get to choose moving forward to tend to my soul in a way, whether or not the people, the environment around me is on board with my vision, can see it, support it or not, that I have to do what I know that I need to do to nurture this garden, this one in here, this one in here, right? I'm also learning that I have to be okay with the pace of my progress. Life is not always going to look like the input, right? The output isn't always going to look like the input, at least not right away. But being okay with the unfolding, being okay with the becoming, and sometimes knowing that what is transpiring, what is unfolding, what is evolving, what is growing, isn't always going to be seen by the naked eye, by other people. But growth is still happening. Evolution is still happening. Transformation is still happening. But it requires you to be present, to pause, slow down, right? To reflect and acknowledge the totality of what really is going on, what really is transpiring. It's not always about how much further you have to go, but also what you've accomplished. So if you've seen in some of my previous videos, I'm just celebrating the dirt being even, right? Like, I'm just celebrating the fact that I was able to create a sprinkler to wet the land, right? Like, they're just celebrating and acknowledging the totality of a situation, of your life, of your experience. And the truth is, yes, there is still so much more to do, but there's also been a lot of growth and a lot of things that have changed. Woo! There's a lot to celebrate right now. Let's just say that. There's a lot to acknowledge and be grateful for right now. And we tend to only hyper focus on what needs to be fixed, what still isn't done, how far we've got to go. But the garden is teaching me to be present with the now, acknowledge, be grateful for who you are, where you are, and what you know, what you have right now. And using that to get to where you want to go next, right? And so that's what has been coming up for me as of late as it pertains specifically to the garden, but this has gone on a little bit longer than I anticipated, but I felt it was also important to give you guys a little bit of context of my journey. I'm no longer in a space of performing and being perfect. I am choosing presence over being polished. I am choosing to be okay with my unfolding, my unraveling. Things change. There's hiccups that are going to happen. And how do I navigate them from a place of harmony, of peace, of clarity, versus fear, frustration, trying to force, fight, or fix things all the time, right? Like, it's life. It is messy. You can't control the outcome of things. And the garden is really helping me to be more patient and understanding, not just of Mother Earth and nature itself, but me. Learning to give myself grace, learning to be more compassionate with my own, even creating content and documenting the experience, learning new things. I don't know anything about gardening. I also haven't really been in the mix of content creation like that in a while either. So I'm learning new things about my phone and the camera, because that's one of the resources that I have resources that I have access to right now. I don't have a camera crew the way that I used to. I don't have X, Y, and Z, the things that I think or used to think that I had to have before I can get started with where I was being told I was supposed to go. Now you can get, if you've been guided to move and go in a particular direction, I don't know what your religious, spiritual, whatever it is, but however you tap in and what you tap into to like move forward in your divine assignment, sometimes we think, well, okay, I hear you, but I don't have this, I don't have that, you think you don't have what you need, but you've got everything you need. You are everything you need. And that's such a cliche thing to say, but I promise you, this is genuinely, again, one of the things that I'm learning from this experience of being back home, but especially being in the garden. Like, you do have what you need to create, to move towards the next best step, right? Because that's all you're trying to do right now, is the next best step. That's literally all you can do, is just the next step, right? So maybe you have a vision, maybe you have a goal. For example, I know what the goal is for this garden and this series, but right now I'm just the next move. Maybe it's to water it. Maybe it's to create my little rose. There's just a next step, and just taking it one day at a time, one step at a time. And that is the same thing that I'm learning even with my life. I've also learned from this gardening, from documenting, right? So content creating, documenting the journey of this garden's development, to trust your process. I am changing the phrasing from trust the process to trust your process. Because when you say the process, it implies that there is a one size fits all, a blueprint process that we all must be following, and that's just not accurate, right? So with that being said, trust your process as the garden and the gardener. What are you trying to bloom? How are you trying to grow? What are you growing into? And what's the process that you need, right? I talked about me, nurturing me so that I am open, I am receptive, I am receiving the guidance for my life. I talked about movement. I talked about being in nature. I talked about creating, right? These are things that are helpful for me to process my thoughts, my emotions, that allow me to recalibrate energetically right? That allow me to sleep better and, feel energized throughout, like certain things that I eat. Like, I know my process now, the environments that are suitable for me, the practices that I must engage in. That is me tending to my garden. That's my process for growth, for joy, for pleasure, for expansion, right? So trusting your process, what might that be? What is your process? What are the things that you know are essential for you to thrive? What are the practices, the tools, the people, the environments, right, that you need to nurture you, mind, body, spirit, and to strengthen your ability to hear, trust, and follow the guidance for your life? And universal intelligence, God, whatever it is that you call it, like, what allows you to be in that space of receptivity, that allows you to be in that space of learning and growing through something despite how uncomfortable it might be. That's what I have been given, not only to share with you, but literally what I have been given the more that I have engaged in this process of gardening, at least to date. There's so many things that I want to say, and I recognize that I'm rambling, but those are the main things. I genuinely felt it was important for me to give context to who I am and how I got here. Definitely check out the other playlists. So I have Refined Garden. I also have It Still Takes a Village, Reimagining the Future of Education, because again, that is my background, and I am still interested in and working on pioneering some interesting ventures in global education. So definitely check out that playlist if you haven't already. We're going to be adding to that. I've got a new series for that coming out soon as well. And what else do I have? Purposely Pursuing Pleasure. That's my other one. I'm so excited about that. I don't necessarily have a series or, anything in particular. It's brewing. I do have a couple of things, but they're still brewing, because I do want to do some collabs, some partnerships for that playlist, Purposely Pursuing Pleasure in My 40s. That playlist is really more of a lifestyle kind of space, and just kind of focusing on, I guess, redefining what pleasure means for me. And, while most people tend to associate that phrase with, physical or sexual intimacy, it's so much more than that, at least for me. And so I will just kind of be showcasing the different things that bring me joy, that, help to illustrate what pleasure is and looks like for me in my life. So yeah, that's the other playlist that I've got. And there are probably 2 more coming, but for now, those are my top 3. Check them out. Check out the content that I've got there so far. And of course, if you haven't already, you can hit that bell to subscribe so you can be the first to know when a new piece of content or whatever channel or whatever playlist it's on, when new content drops. Also, like, share, and don't forget to comment. I would love to hear from you a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your journey and anything that has surfaced for you as you have tuned in. If you've made it this far, you're a real one. Thank you. And until next time, it's Miss Marisha. I'm your host. It's Refined Garden. And as we said, you are the gardener and the garden. Trust what wants to bloom. Bye-bye, beautiful people.